December 17th, 1986, Dumont, New Jersey. State police, ATF, FBI, and others have been working with an undercover agent posing as a mobster. After 6 years of infiltrating a New York City crime family, this undercover agent and the others are ready to arrest a hitman for the murder of 5 men. When they corner him, make their arrest, and try him for murder, they discover his crimes spanned 3 decades, and by his own account, over 100 victims. When he was home, he was a husband and devoted father. When he was away, he executed ruthless contracts for the mafia, employing methodical techniques, including freezing his victims to mask their true time of death. But how many people did he really murder? And did he exaggerate his own body count to fuel his twisted legend? This is the chilling truth about Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman. Hey, y'all, I'm Kris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potterworth. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
To season 6 of our podcast.
Yes, welcome. And for our friends in the Mariana Island, Hafa Adai.
I'm gonna admit it now. Yeah. I have no idea where that is.
It's out in the ocean.
Well, that much I figured. We want to thank everyone who's been here from the beginning and to all who are new to our podcast.
Yep.
As long as you guys are listening, we're going to keep on talking about bad guys and true crime, like the guy we're going to talk about today.
Yes.
Wherever you are listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitched to Homicide, then like, rate, and review the podcast so others who like true crime and are just like you can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button below.
Yes, please do.
If you want true crime with us all the time, please go join our closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Go to Facebook, type in H2H, In-Laws and Outlaws. Answer a couple questions. You're in. Go join.
Yes.
It's getting to be a really big group. We just love you guys. And let me tell you, we are selective. Not everybody gets in.
Yeah.
You have to answer the questions, and you really need to be into true crime.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of extra information in there. I like to post other pictures and stuff in there that you don't get to see if you're just listening to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform.
Like Scotty.
Every now and then he makes it in there.
Yes.
But it's a great group of folks. You can find us on Instagram at Hitched to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. And we have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee or me some Diet Mountain Dew. I do get one every single day, but I'm mostly drinking water these days.
Yay.
You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes where it says, send Kris and Rob a text.
Yeah.
This case is so interesting. It's been on my radar forever. We've had more than one person request it. I watched so many documentaries about this guy years ago, Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman.
Yeah, I did too. I mean, I have two passions, World War II history and anything about the mafia. I have no idea why, but I just do. So I had watched a documentary on this guy. And
there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, and you're right. We really don't know if he's telling the truth about all the people he killed, but the ones that they know he killed was pretty ruthless.
Yeah. I did lots of research on him, and the more research I did, the more questions I had. So, there you have it. I'm going to talk about some of these mafia guys, so I might quiz you as we go along, honey, to see if you know their little mobster monikers.
All right.
Before we get started, let me thank some sources: Murderpedia, The Daily News, The Herald News, themobmuseum.org, Find a Grave, AmericanMafia.com, The Sun, All That's Interesting, The Cinemaholic, Analysis of the Psychopathic Traits of Richard the Iceman Kuklinski, World's Most Evil Killers, True Crime Central, The Casual Criminalist Podcast, A&E's Undercover Caught on Tape, and HBO's The Iceman Tapes Parts 1, 2, and 3.
Wow.
They just kept going back to this guy to talk to him.
Yeah, wow. All right, well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Richard Leonard Kuklinski was born on April 11th, 1935 in Jersey City, New Jersey, to Stanley and Anna Kuklinski.
Okay.
Richard's father was Polish, hence the name Kuklinski.
Right.
His mother was Irish. She was also an orphan, so she really didn't know what a loving family looked like. It's a bad family dynamic just right out of the gate.
Okay.
The family lived in the projects. And Richard is second of 4 children. Now, his father, Stanley, was a brakeman on the railroad, and he's also a violent alcoholic who would not only beat his wife, Anna, severely, but also the kids. And he did this on a regular basis without giving it a second thought, and sometimes for absolutely no reason at all.
I guess I just never understand that.
That's because you came from a loving family where your parents weren't psychopaths.
That's true. That's
you
true.
know?
But it's just beyond me. I think that's why I like cop shows and lockup and prison shows and all that stuff, because it's such another side of the world that I just have no clue about, that is just interesting to me. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there are bad parents out there. What is it? You need a license to drive a car, but not to be a parent. So
yeah, it's crazy.
His mom, Anna, was a devout Catholic, and she was also a strict disciplinarian. She's very much a part of the abuse as well. Her weapon of choice was a broomstick.
Jeez.
And she just beat the kids with it whenever she wanted to. She did work, I believe, like in a slaughterhouse, a meat market. But the abuse by Stanley was so bad that in February of 1941, when Richard is 5, his dad beat his older brother, 7-year-old Florian, to death.
Oh.
And when the ambulance arrived, his mother lied and said that Florian had fallen down the stairs.
Isn't that what they always say?
He just fell down the stairs.
Jeez.
He's bumping into things. Yeah, when the kids have bruises,
he's
so clumsy.
Wow.
Yeah. Stanley would never be charged in the death of his son. And not long after he kills Florian, Stanley up and leaves the family, but he's going to come back periodically, usually drunk and usually violent. Richard was now the oldest boy, and he was kind of left to take care of himself and his siblings, which included a brother named Joseph Michael Kuklinski. So no father figure, and the father figure he did have was a monster. When he's a teen, he starts drifting into crime. And he's really kind of a scrawny guy, which is interesting because I know for a fact that when Rob was like a freshman in high school, he was like 4 feet tall and weighed 97 pounds. Am I close? Is that right?
I was 4'11".
Were you really?
Yeah. No,
You were little. You were a little guy.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I was close to being 5 foot. I was very excited because I almost hit 5 feet, but I was 98 pounds.
Yeah. Oh, I can't believe I got that close.
Yeah.
Well, when Richard's a teen, he's kind of tall, but he's thin. He's scraggly. And he sort of starts drifting into crime. And one day he decided to steal some wine, thinking he could sell it and get money for it. I mean, they are poor and they're living in the projects.
Right.
He went home and he panicked, thinking that the police were going to come for him. And he has this realization that when nobody comes for him at all, that it didn't really matter if he did anything bad or good because nobody noticed anything about what he was doing.
Hey, I got away with it. I can do this.
Yeah. In 1949, when Richard is only 14, there's a gang of teenagers in his neighborhood in Jersey City. They called themselves the Project Boys because they lived in the projects, and they liked to bully Richard. And even though eventually he's going to be 6'5", 300 pounds, which was my point about you, because you grew like to 6'1" over a summer from like not even 5 feet tall.
Well, what was funny about that summer, I was an exchange student in South America, so I was gone all summer, so I didn't see anybody.
And then you came back 6'1".
Yeah.
He was still 97 pounds, y'all. I've seen the pictures.
Yeah, I was totally skinny, but had a different haircut in the whole 9 yards. Like, who's the new kid?
Yeah. Who's the new redheaded kid with the sunburn because he's been in Mexico?
Lord.
But he's going to be 6'5", 6'4", 6'5", and 300 pounds. But he's this scrawny kid, and the boys would pick on him. And they, like his father, would beat him. And this goes on for a bit until one day he decided he'd had enough. And he's 14. He decides he's going to take his revenge on one particular gang member, Charlie Chase, their ringleader. And on December 10th, 1949, Richard jumped him, attacked him with a thick wooden dowel, clubbing him and beating him to death.
Wow.
Then he chopped off Charlie's fingertips with a hatchet and removed his teeth before dumping him over a bridge and into an icy river.
He thought that out.
Yeah. He was getting rid of identifying evidence at 14.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's the kicker. The next day, when Richard hears that Charlie's missing and eventually presumed dead, he kind of felt like somebody. You know, he was like, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
And it made him feel good.
Yeah.
So after his first murder, Richard went after the other boys in the gang, attacking them all with this metal pole that he found in a trash can, nearly beating all of them to death. And later, Richard will say that his first murder was the one that taught him that it was better to be the attacker than to be attacked.
Wow.
Better to give than to receive.
Yeah.
And all this is kind of a theme with Richard. He hurts people just for making him feel bad about something.
Wow.
His number one pet peeve was, quote, loud-mouthed people, end quote. Well, join the gang, Richard.
Yeah.
You know, the guy who gets on his phone when you're trying to get off the plane and he's talking so loud, or people who are talking on speakerphone in the airport.
Yep.
These are the people that I roll my eyes at. I'm usually pretty quiet and mind my own business, but I'm like, dude, really? We don't need to know. Y'all just landed in the ATL. Yeah, we all did, dude. Just wait till you get off the plane.
I'll get that Excel sheet to you.
It's never anything important either. You know, they act like they're on the transplant team or something. So just wait till you get off the plane like everybody else. Okay, I've said my thing. I'm off my soapbox.
There you go.
But he also, when he's a kid, he hates these loudmouth people. He also stated that when he was a kid, he used to abuse animals, like killing cats. By torturing them. Yeah. I read or I listened to him give an example where he threw a cat into an incinerator when he was a kid.
Geez.
Soon after Richard leaves home, he marries a woman named Linda, who was 9 years older than he was. He's going to have 2 sons from this first marriage, Richard Jr. and David. But when he reaches his 20s, he's got a lot going on. Richard started his own crew. He had several people working for him. His gang would steal cars and chop shop them or sell them outright. He dabbled in money laundering, where he started setting up fake companies, which he then used to clean the money, and he was into extortion. He has this scary build now. He's very intimidating. He's like 6'4", 6'5". He's not 300 pounds yet. It's going to take him a few years to get there.
Okay.
But he's very big, and he has, you know how people talk about someone who has vacant eyes or just dead eyes?
Yep.
Richard Kuklinski has that.
He was very intimidating.
He was very intimidating.
Yeah.
Then in 1958, he gets a minor theft charge, and it freaks him out. He didn't want to get caught with all he was doing, so he took a real job with a trucking company in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And in 1961, when Richard is 26 years old, he meets 19-year-old Barbara Padrici. Barbara worked as a secretary at the trucking company where Richard, who was married at the time and 7 years older than her, worked on this loading dock.
Okay.
And things hadn't been going smoothly with Linda, his first wife, and he divorces her and leaves. And when he leaves in 1961, he never sees his first 2 sons ever again.
Really?
Never sees them again.
Wow.
Which in the long run, these kids were probably like, I mean, they're grown adults, obviously, now. They're probably like, thanks, Dad. We appreciate it.
They dodged a bullet.
Then Richard really pursued Barbara. After their first date, he gave her flowers and a gift, and he invited her to have a second date with him. And it wasn't long until he would wait for her after work every single night with flowers. But Barbara wasn't sure she was ready to commit to just one guy. She's right out of high school. She's only 19 years old.
And how old is he at this time, you said?
He's 26.
Okay.
But Richard was obsessed with Barbara, saying over and over, quote, "I love you, lady," end quote.
And romantic.
He's such a romantic. "I love you, lady." And she would say to him, quote, "Me too, me too." But she didn't love him. And apparently she never told him that she loved him.
Well, what she meant by me too is that I love myself. Yeah. He just didn't get it.
They're going to be married 25 years, and she's going to say that she never told him she loved him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, that's brutal.
Yeah. That's a problem. That's a red flag.
That's a red flag. Have you seen the TikTok account where the guy runs across the field with the red flag? That's what's it's what's happening in my head right now. The guy's running across the field with the red flag.
That's funny.
Then one day, Barbara and Richard are sitting in his car, and Barbara tells him she wants to date other people. "I don't want to just see you. I want to date other people." And Richard lost his mind, and he had a knife, and he jabbed her in the back with the tip of this hunting knife. Now, she doesn't even realize it happened at the time because he did it through the seat of the car.
Wow.
So he hits with this knife so hard that he gets her with the tip of the knife.
Nothing says love you like
Nothing says I love you like
back.
Exactly.
Jeez.
Exactly. She said at the time she didn't even realize what had happened, but it was deep enough to draw blood. And then he says to her, "You belong to me." And he threatened to murder her entire family. And then I read that he choked her until she passed out.
So I'm guessing that him going into, the mafia kind of lifestyle was probably a good thing for him, because I doubt whether he would have ever got a job writing for Hallmark cards. Just thinking it.
Yeah, again, I just keep seeing the red flag guy run by.
Lord.
The next day, Richard comes to her. What do you think? Apologizing. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry that I stabbed you and choked you out and threatened to kill your family.
But you have to understand.
Exactly. But you have to understand it's because of my intense feelings for you. That's what he told her.
Jeez.
He told her that he wanted to marry her. And reluctantly, Barbara agrees. And not just because she was afraid of what Richard would do with her family, but because she was pregnant. On September 8th, 1961, several months pregnant, Barbara marries Richard. And then, like father, like son, he beats her. He beats her so badly that she miscarries the baby.
Oh, man.
But she's afraid to leave him. So she stays and she becomes pregnant again. And again, for a second time, he beats her and she miscarries. Then in 1964, Barbara gets pregnant again, and they have a healthy child. Kristen is born on March 27th, 1964.
So basically, she was born in between beatings.
That she was, after two miscarriages caused by Richard. Kristen is born.
Wow.
Richard sets about becoming a father and a husband. Of course, to the outside world, he's this new dad. He's still abusive to Barbara.
Right.
A year later, April 21st, 1965, Barbara gives birth to another daughter, Merrick. And these two look like twins. These little girls, they're so close together in age. They really look like twins.
Okay.
But Richard's criminal career obviously began before meeting Barbara while working in a film lab. He began quietly bootlegging movies after work and soon broke into the bootleg porn industry. He had a business called Sunset Studio where he was pirating porno tapes. Yeah. So he's a bootlegger with all these, and he's pirating these tapes. And this actually morphed into something more lucrative because pirating porn and distributing porn is big money. But if you were going to go into the porn business, you were going to be working with the mob.
Mm.
It's still 1965, and this is when, through these connections to the mob, he meets and becomes associated with Roy DeMeo, who was a butcher by trade. They actually called him the Butcher.
Wow.
And he is a soldier in the Gambino crime family.
Oh.
And when Roy DeMeo discovers that Richard had done some, quote, special work for another crime family, he recruited him and introduced Richard to the Gambino family. Mostly because he was tired of Richard encroaching on his porn business. So it was kind of like, this guy's got his own thing going on. We just need to bring him into the fold.
Right.
Because he's 6'4", 6'5", got the dead eyes, and he doesn't have a problem with hurting people.
He'll fit right in.
He's going to fit right into the Gambino family.
Man.
Now, Roy DeMeo was the creator of what was called the Gemini method to dispose of murder victims for the Gambinos. Have you heard of this?
I don't know.
It's gonna ring a bell as soon as I start talking about it.
Okay.
He's a former butcher's assistant, so he bragged that he could slice, chop, and dismember victims for easy, unseen disposal. He perfected this way of murdering and packing bodies, and it was called the Gemini method because they did it in a certain location, the Gemini Lounge.
Okay, I don't know any of this.
You don't know this?
No.
Okay.
No.
For the location, and he had like this whole procedure.
Okay.
The site of the butchering was the Gemini Lounge, a local bar he secretly owned on Flatlands Avenue in the east area of Brooklyn. Now, DeMeo, his targets unknowingly entered the door inside this bar into a flat that was rented by a gang member named Joseph Giuliano. I'm going to butcher all these Italian names. Giuliano. I'm sorry. He was nicknamed Dracula, so let me just call him that.
Okay.
Dracula's apartment was a slaughterhouse, otherwise known as the Horror Hotel.
Jeez.
And inside DeMeo's murder toolkit, he had guns, ropes, knives, ice picks, and various accoutrements for carving, chopping, and sawing. I'm telling you.
Wow.
Victims of this ritual-like Gemini method would first suffer a suppressed gunshot to the head. Then, as former DeMeo associate turned witness Dominic Montaglio testified in court, quote, somebody would wrap a towel around to stop the blood, and somebody would stab him in the heart to stop the blood from pumping.
Gee whiz.
The guys, some clad in only underwear to avoid stains, would drag the body to the bathroom, let it bleed out in the shower drain, then put the corpse on a swimming pool liner, spread in the living room, cut the body up, place the pieces in plastic bags, and finally in separate cardboard boxes for delivery to Brooklyn's Fountain Avenue dump.
Oh, man. Wow.
So this is who he's learning from, and this is who he's hanging out with. DeMeo is his friend.
Jeez.
DeMeo brings him into this. That's DeMeo's crew doing all of this, and DeMeo brings Richard into all of this.
Wow.
And speaking of in the middle of all of this, his son Dwayne is born on January 13th, 1969.
Okay.
Then around the time of Christmas in 1971, a man named Bruno Latini owed Richard Kuklinski $1,500. So on Christmas Eve, 1971, Richard decides something needed to be done. And I read a couple different accounts of this. He spoke with Latini first and said, I want my money. And Bruno was like, I don't have it. And he was mad, but he let it go. But then he's wrapping Christmas presents on Christmas Eve, 1971. And the more he thinks about it, the madder he gets. And he decides he's going to do something. Something had to be done right then. And Bruno is a Manhattan bar owner. He was described as, and this was in the newspaper, a short, balding, mobbed-up guy.
Okay.
Short, balding, mobbed-up guy.
Whatever that is.
That Richard Kuklinski had given $1,500 worth of porn films on consignment. And because Latini had mob connections through his brother, a Gambino capo, Eddie Lino,
Wow.
who would later be murdered by crooked cops Louis Appolito and Stephen Carpacca, Chappa. I am so sorry, Stephen.
That's what you get for being Irish.
It looks like Carpaccio. But these two were killed at the behest of Anthony Gaspipe Casso.
Jeez.
But Latini thought he could get away without paying, and he kept stalling Richard. And then he stopped returning Richard's phone calls,
No.
and this really made him mad. It ate at him, and that Christmas Eve, it was quiet, and he just kept thinking about it, and he was thinking about Latini, not his family.
Right.
And when everybody went to bed, Richard quietly got into his car and drove into the city looking for Bruno Latini, looking to kill him.
Wow.
It was snowing really hard, but that didn't stop Richard. When he reached Latini's bar, he learned that Bruno had just left. So Richard went to the lot on the corner of 49th and 10th Avenue and found Bruno Latini sitting in his car. And Latini invited Richard into his car and gave him this song and dance about his $1,500. And Richard pulled out a .38 and shot him 3 times in the head.
Wow. In his car.
In his car, in Latini's car.
Wow.
Yeah. For a minute or two, he said he was blinded and couldn't hear because the gunfire was inside this enclosed space.
Well, yeah.
His ears were ringing.
Jeez.
If you've ever been that close to gunfire, I mean, there's a reason they wear like the noise canceling things over their ears.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why a lot of cops have hearing loss.
Yeah.
It's from firing their weapon.
Yeah, right. I remember the first time I fired a pistol, I was at my best friend's parents' house in Louisville. And his dad actually was a marksman trainer for the Kentucky State Police. And he had a little gun range out back of their house there. And I had a .45 pistol. And I remember firing it at a target. It ricocheted off the target and came back and hit me right in the thigh. I mean, you know, it was far enough away. It left a big bruise, but I don't know which was worse, the bruise getting hit by the bullet or the deafness that you suffer when you fire a gun like that. It is amazing.
Was it a rubber bullet you were firing?
No, but I was far enough away that the ricochet didn't penetrate. It just...
Rob's just out here firing a gun in suburban Louisville.
No, it was out.
What do I...
It was in the woods.
Oh, okay.
It was a firing range in the woods. It wasn't in town. No, it was an actual firing range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But you're right. It's very loud.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I almost said, and you fired the .45 and it knocked your 97-pound body off its feet.
No, I weighed 135 at that point.
It'll still knock you off your feet.
Yeah.
If you've got a big enough gun.
Yeah, it was a big gun.
But after he shoots him 3 times, Richard finds Bruno Latini's wallet, and there was a little over $3,000 in it. And Richard took his $1,500, and that's it, and put the wallet back with the rest of the money still in it.
Okay.
He finally gets out of the car. He goes back to his Cadillac. He returns home to New Jersey. In the morning, it's Christmas Day, and a parking lot attendant found Latini dead. And police find his wallet on him. There's $1,600 in it. This murder is never linked to Richard by the police or by the mob. Quote, "I killed him out of principle. He thought he could treat me like a piece of wood," end quote.
That'll teach him.
Yeah, the police were really kind of baffled because he had this money in his wallet. He had his watch on, he had valuables on him, and it didn't look like anything was missing.
Right.
Richard starts doing robberies and other assignments for the Gambino family, one of which was continuing to pirate pornographic tapes. They're kind of like, if you can't beat them, join them. Mm-hmm. But soon his talent for killing was realized, and he stood out amongst his associates. And DeMeo decided it was time to put Richard to the test. And one day he took Richard out in his car, and they parked on a city street in New York City. And DeMeo then selected an apparently random target. It was a man out walking his dog. And then he told Richard to kill him. And without questioning the order, Richard Kuklinski got out, walks toward the man, he passes him, and then he turns and shoots the man in the back of the head.
Wow.
Then he gets back in the car with DeMeo, and they drive off.
Jeez.
And from that moment on, Richard Kuklinski is DeMeo's favorite enforcer.
Wow.
Because he had no empathy, he showed no remorse. His blood, it's like his heart rate doesn't go up. His blood pressure stays the same. He just kills and walks away. Feels nothing.
Man.
And Richard liked to kill in a variety of ways. You got to mix it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
His favorite way to kill was cyanide.
Really?
Because it killed quickly. It was hard to detect in a toxicology test. He would inject it into his victim, put it on their food. He would put it into an aerosol spray or just spill it on his victim's skin. And this is his favorite way to dispose of a body or body parts. He used a 55-gallon oil drum.
Jeez.
He also put bodies in the trunk of a car and had it crushed in a junkyard. And he claimed to have left bodies sitting on park benches more than once in the city.
Wow.
So all this killing, yet none of DeMeo's crew will say that Richard was involved in any of the murders that they committed. And Richard was photographed only once at the Gemini Lounge when he reportedly visited the club to purchase a handgun from DeMeo's crew. So he talks a lot about being this number one guy to go to. But when they talked to DeMeo's crew, they're like, he never went on a job with me. I was never with him. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't out killing on his own.
Right.
1973. We're only to 1973, which is a little bit scary. A man named Paul Rothenberg was New York's premier distributor of pornographic movies. Now, Paul made extortion payments to DeMeo and Anthony Nino Gaggi, a Gambino capo, 15 years older than him.
Okay.
3 weeks before this murder, authorities raided Rothenberg's film processing business and questioned him about his bank checks to Roy DeMeo. And Nino ordered the hit on Paul Rothenberg, and they send in Kuklinski.
Okay.
He leads him into an alley on Long Island, where he fired a silenced .38 caliber handgun twice into Paul's head. So I just want to say this now, because he has no feeling, because he's just not really, the whole time I was reading this, I'm like, Richard Kuklinski is Luca Brasi.
Yeah.
He's Luca.
Yeah.
Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes.
He does.
Although I think my favorite part is where Luca is like practicing his lines before he goes in to see the dom at the wedding.
Godfather, I'd like to thank you for...
On this day.
Yes.
Yeah, on this beautiful day of your daughter's
and
wedding.
May your firstborn be a masculine.
May your firstborn child be a masculine child. That's what you need to say to everybody, y'all. Yeah. May your firstborn child be a masculine child.
What a great movie.
If they don't get it, you're like, you can't be my friend because you don't know the Godfather.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But Richard knew that this was the beginning of his beautiful friendship with some of New York and New Jersey's most infamous crime families. He's now this killer for hire, and he left a trail, although they couldn't associate him with many of these murders. Whenever there were unsolved murders that were associated with Cosa Nostra, which is the mafia, authorities would check travel records, and they could see that Richard would have been in that area just for the day. Places like Switzerland and Hawaii, where someone would end up dead during his one-day stay.
Right.
So he was in Hawaii, in Maui, my favorite island, by the way. There was a man thrown out of a third-floor balcony of his hotel.
Jeez.
Richard was there that day, gone the next. That man died that night. So Richard threw him off the balcony, flew back to New York before the guy was even discovered, put in the hospital, and passed away.
Wow.
So again, he feels no empathy. None of it was personal. It was all business. It's not personal. It's business.
Yeah.
And Richard Kuklinski isn't even on the police's radar yet, okay?
Man.
And Richard didn't just obey his official orders. He also carried out murders of his own, prowling on the Upper West Side of New York City, where he said he targeted people who annoyed him or somehow slighted him. Again, he liked to hurt anybody who tried to make him feel, quote, bad.
So he was an overachiever murderer.
He's like a killing machine.
Yeah.
And if you cross him the wrong way, boom, you're gone.
Wow.
Now, to Richard's family, he's just a husband and a dad. I'm going to tell you this right from the get-go. She's married to him for 25 years. She has no idea what he's doing.
That's incredible.
No idea what he's doing.
Wow.
They thought he was just this guy who went to work, came home each night to their suburban New Jersey house. Richard and Barbara had these 3 kids, Merrick, Kristen, and Dwayne. And on the outside, he's this normal father. He's going to church where he is an usher.
Oh, man.
Going every Sunday with the family and even hosting backyard barbecues and parties with the neighbors.
Wow. And I may have missed this, but what did they think that he did for a living when he went to work?
That he dealt in like international money, and he was an accountant, sort of that kind of line of thing. It had to do with money, obviously, but
Right.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
But he's this great guy. He's really charming. Everybody likes him in the neighborhood. But behind the scenes, he's being abusive to Barbara.
Right.
He never touched his children. But according to them, he was mentally abusive. His daughter, Merrick, she remembers that her dad had terrible and terrifying road rage. And he also killed her dog one night for coming home late.
What?
Yeah.
Oh,
You
man.
can't like anybody who kills the dog.
No. He just went down on my list.
His kids also, Scotty's not around, is he?
No.
Okay.
He didn't
I
hear
was going to
that.
say cover his ears.
He didn't hear it.
But he also liked to take out his anger on the furniture in the house.
He hates these cans.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But their kids and Barbara said that they never knew where their money came from. But it did allow them to buy this really nice house. He put in a pool in the backyard. They had luxuries like new cars all the time, new television sets. But Barbara is still seeing his violent side because Richard broke her nose 3 times.
Gee whiz.
And once tried to run her down with a car.
It was a new car, though.
It was a new caddy. Yeah, he liked the caddies.
Wow.
He often woke her up in the middle of the night by holding a pillow over her face and threatening to kill her.
Jeez.
Which is what most women do with their partners who snore like a freight train. They're like, if I just take this pillow and put it over his face just for a little bit. Instead, I just tap him on the shoulder and say, turn over, honey. I'm just kidding. I would never. I have to make sure I'm not implicating myself in anything here.
Yeah.
So to their neighbors, he presented himself as this loving husband to Barbara. Everybody who met him, according to Barbara, quote, thought I was the luckiest person in the world, end quote. The flower truck showed up at their house once a week. Barbara had new jewelry all the time, and he bought her a $12,000 raccoon coat.
Wow.
I almost said mink coat, but it's not a mink coat. It's a raccoon coat. And raccoon coats, they're super soft. That's like a beaver coat, too. Those are really soft, too. Yeah. Don't email me about wearing fur. Just don't, okay? When Barbara married Richard, she thought she could change him. But he was really jealous, and she was worried if she, quote, tried to escape, he would hunt me down and tear me limb from limb, end quote. Honey, thank you for never, even in my worst moods, threatening to tear me limb from limb.
No, I just run down here to the studio.
He just walks away. I'm like, run. I'm just going to let you have some time to yourself, honey.
That's it. I know you need to be by yourself.
But Richard had no remorse, no conscience when it came to killing. And according to many psychiatrists, there's a relationship between physically abusive treatment in childhood and criminal aggression. Duh.
Yeah.
Because we've seen it over and over again.
Yeah.
But Richard specifically has been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, psychopathy, paranoid personality disorder, and strong psychopathic tendencies based on genetic, hereditary, and negative environment upbringings.
So this is a bad thing.
Yeah, that's a long list.
Good night.
And psychopaths are people who give evidence of having a whole lot of charm alongside their intimidation and manipulation. So, I mean, you think about some of the worst serial killers, Bundy, for instance.
Yeah.
Very charming.
Yeah.
Very manipulative. A cold-blooded killer.
Right.
And these types of people also use violence in order to control others. All this just to satisfy their own needs. They don't show remorse or guilt or empathy. They have no power to take responsibility for their actions. And Richard has admitted that he had a high temper and no remorse for what he did. And for him, it was about being in control and having power.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, the one thing he didn't have as a child was control over the way his father treated him.
Yeah, sure.
And again, he never called his parents mom and dad.
Really?
No. I mean, as an adult, he called them Stanley and Anna.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's being really detached.
Yeah. But again, his family and neighbors have no idea about Richard's activities. They just thought he was this successful businessman.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes he would leave the house at any time of day or night to do a job, even if it was in the middle of dinner. He had a pager. And then if it went off, he was gone.
Wow.
Now, lots of mob guys have nicknames. Scarface Capone, Lucky Luciano.
Luciano, right.
Bugsy Siegel, Machine Gun Kelly. What was John Gotti's name?
Oh, Teflon Don.
The Teflon Don, yeah. Then there's Tony Big Tuna Arcado.
Yep.
Joseph Bonanno. What was his name?
I know it, and I can't think of it off the bat. I can see his face, too.
Joey Bananas.
Joey Bananas, that's right. Daggone it.
And at first, Richard is nicknamed the Polak because he's Polish.
Right.
And it wasn't Polak, it was Polak, the Polak. I can hear somebody with an Italian accent saying that, you know, from Brooklyn, somebody from Brooklyn saying that. Because he's Polish.
Yeah.
January 31st, 1980, Richard meets up with 42-year-old Pennsylvania businessman George Malibran. George William Malibran Jr. was born on February 1st, 1938 in Brooklyn, New York. In 1980, he was living in Huntingdon, Pennsylvania. He's a big guy, 6'3", 280. So he and Richard are looking eye to eye. George was in the pornography business with Richard. Richard called him Georgie Boy. And he liked him. Quote, I really liked him. One of the few people I ever really liked, end quote. But George had some bad habits like gambling and debts to loan sharks. On January 31st, Richard leaves his house to meet Roy DeMeo. And George owed Roy money because of all these gambling debts.
Right.
And Richard had vouched for him. He had vouched for Georgie Boy with Roy DeMeo. And it's now on Richard's head because Georgie Boy's not paying.
Right.
And DeMeo is really mad about it. But what Roy DeMeo didn't know was that Richard was even more pissed with Georgie Boy. And it had been simmering since the year before. Because in the summer of 1979, Georgie Boy showed up at Richard's house, just walking his cute little butt into the backyard during a family gathering, asking for him. Hey, Richard, I need to see you. Hey, Richie, I need to talk to you. And Richard did not mix his professional and his personal life. And he was so angry with George, and he held on to this. Now, with DeMeo mad about the money George owed him, Richard was pissed at George, and he told him so. And George reminded Richard, I know where your family lives.
Oh, geez.
That is not a smart move, Georgie Boy.
Wow.
Of course, it's a veiled threat.
Yeah.
It's also the last threat that George would make in his life.
Yeah,
because right then and there, Richard, he's got him in the car. Richard pulled over and fired 5 shots into his head.
Jeez.
With a .38.
Wow.
But now Richard, who always puts thought into what he's doing, even when he's killing, well, now he's got a body to dispose of that he didn't plan on disposing of on that day.
Yeah.
And what's Richard's favorite way to dispose of a body? I already told you this.
55
gallon, the oil drum.
Right.
But George is a big guy, and he wouldn't fit. So he stuffed the corpse into the drum head first, and he finds that he can't quite make his legs fit in. And the answer was to break one. He cut the tendons behind the knee and snapped the leg forward. Then he placed it on top of the barrel. So he folds that leg on top.
Yeah, I will never be able to spatchcock a chicken ever again in my life. Just because of that imagery in my head.
But they're so good in the smoker that way, honey.
They are. I'm just going to have to close my eyes when I do it.
So he puts his leg on top of the barrel. Then he secures the top of the barrel to it. Then he rolled it off a cliff in the Palisades. It hit some 60 feet below. And after this, Richard paid Roy DeMeo off himself. He paid off George's debts.
Right.
He was done with George Malaban.
Okay.
A few days later, on February 5th, the owner of a Jersey City building walks out and sees at the foot of this cliff, there's this dented drum.
Yeah.
But the impact of the drum on the ground caused it to pop open.
Yeah, of course it did.
I mean, he was, as my mother used to say, 10 pounds of potatoes in a 5-pound sack.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
So this guy gets closer and he sees 2 bloody human legs, and one of them is turned the wrong way. When police ID him as George Malaban, they start poking around and they hear from George's brother that George was seriously afraid of one man, Richard Kuklinski. Mm. On the day George is murdered, he's carrying with him $27,000 in cash. He told his family the money was going to be used to buy a batch of tapes. There are no suspects in this murder, although the police do know what George was supposedly doing. He was meeting up with this guy named Richie,
right,
or Big Richie.
Right.
But now he's on the authorities' radar. March 14th, 1980, Detective Peter Calabro is slowly driving his car through a snowstorm. Richard had been hired by the Gravano family. The member that hired him was Sammy the Bull Gravano.
Yeah.
Peter was a dirty cop in deep with the Gambino family, and they decided it was time to cut ties with Peter, and he needed to be silenced. So they sent Richard, and Richard positioned his van on the road that led to Peter's suburban New Jersey home, and he waited for him. He was waiting for Peter to pass him. And it's a really bad snowy night, and Richard can't even drive that fast. And he's sitting on the side of the road, and Sammy the Bull gave Richard a walkie-talkie, a photo of Peter, and a double-barrel shotgun. And when Peter slowed his Honda Civic to get past Richard's van, Richard, quote, cut loose with both barrels of the blue and black 12-gauge shotgun, shooting Calabro in the side of the head with double-aught buckshot rounds, end quote.
Wow.
When he carries out the job, he doesn't know he's a cop. But according to Richard, it didn't matter to him. But killing a cop, even a dirty one, is serious business and is really kind of in violation of the mafia code. But they ordered the hit at the same time. They're the ones that ordered the hit. And there are those who don't believe this story. The disbelievers don't think that Sammy the Bull called for the hit and Richard did not carry out the hit, but that Peter was involved in a stolen car ring headed up by Roy DeMeo. And there are mafia experts who say that Sammy the Bull had never done business with Peter. And also investigators on the New York side of the Hudson River think that Peter's murder wasn't a mob hit at all. It was a family thing. In 1977, Peter's first wife drowned under suspicious circumstances, and 2 of her brothers are considered key suspects in Peter's murder, their motive being revenge for the death of their sister. Now, one of Richard's friends was a guy named Robert Prongay. Robert sold ice cream out of his Mr. Softy truck. And if you've ever been to New York City or Jersey in the summer, these trucks are everywhere. Yeah. And Robert was an Army-trained demolitions expert who was highly versed in the art of destruction. And he teamed up with Richard for several deals in the pornography trade. And he, too, was doing hits for Roy DeMeo when needed. And Richard Kuklinski learned a lot from Mr. Softy, that's what they called him, One thing that Robert was good at was using various types of drugs and chemicals to kill, and he was the one who turned him on to cyanide. He taught Richard how to put cyanide in a spray bottle, which could be used to quickly and easily take someone out. And once the poison got into them through the nose, they were gone. He even demonstrated this technique. And in less than 15 seconds, Richard watched a man fall dead in the street.
Wow.
So Mr. Softy's like, it really works. Let me show you how.
Gee whiz.
And he just goes out into the street and sprays it in
randomly.
Somebody's face. Mm-hmm.
Man.
Yeah. And somehow, people don't know how, but somehow Robert Prongay, Mr. Softy, he managed to get cyanide quite easily. And Kuklinski never learned this source.
Really?
Nope,
Wow.
never learned it.
Huh.
And that's going to come back to bite him in the butt.
Okay.
Prongay also experimented with other things. Mr. Softy, he tried other things too. He wanted to know, for example, if a body kept frozen could foil the medical examiner's reading for a time of death. I mean, he's driving around an ice cream truck.
Yeah.
So if this is true, then a killer would never have to worry about an alibi because they'd never be able to determine the time of death.
Yeah. You couldn't pinpoint that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So because they want to know this, can you freeze a body? 50-year-old Louis Masgay becomes the guinea pig. July 1st, 1981, a Pennsylvania businessman, 50-year-old Louis Leonard Masgay, is last seen in public on his way to New Jersey for a dinner. He was going to buy videotapes from Richard and was carrying $95,000 in cash in the side panel of his car. It's just like your smuggling shows, honey.
Oh, man. I keep hand sanitizer in the side of my
That's where I keep my hand sanitizer, too. But yeah, don't they keep drugs in the side panels of the car? Yeah.
Oh,
and
they put them everywhere.
He had $95,000 in the side panel of his car.
Jeez.
Lewis lives in 40 Fort, Pennsylvania, and he ran a business with his son, a convenience store, and he's a family man. And his meeting with Richard, they were just going to discuss this videotape deal. And Lewis wanted to buy blank tapes. And he would record on them and then have his patron buy these bootlegged whatever. I don't know if he was doing porn, if he was just doing regular movies.
Right.
Or what. I mean, you know, when you go to New York City, you can go to Chinatown and whatever the latest movie is, they'll have it on a DVD, but it's some guy sitting in the movie theater.
Yeah, in the back row.
Yeah, there's like a fly that goes by. You can hear other people talking, somebody munching popcorn. But yeah, exactly. But Lewis had already attempted this exchange with Richard several times, and each time, Richard stood him up. He just wouldn't show up. And Masgay didn't realize that this is kind of part of Richard's M.O. He wanted to get his targets all worked up over some non-existent deal, increasing both the anticipation and the price he was going to charge them each time.
Okay.
So he's like he wants to screw with their minds, too.
Yeah.
When he arrives in New Jersey, he meets Richard at this diner, and then Lewis disappears. The only sign that something had happened to him was that they found his abandoned van on Route 17 in Bergen County. And the secret panel where he'd kept all his cash had been ripped out, and the $95,000 was gone. Richard shot him in the back of the head, although I read that he laced his hamburger with cyanide, so maybe he did both. From different stories pieced together, it's apparent that Mr. Softy helped Richard hide this body. There was reason to believe that the corpse had been laying at least for a while in the freezer in Mr. Softy's ice cream truck. And he's out serving ice cream to kids.
Oh, man. Adding a new dimension to Neapolitan.
And there's a dead body in the freezer in his truck.
Wow.
So while this body's in the freezer, Richard rented some industrial storage space, got himself a freezer. One witness later claimed to have seen Lewis's body hanging in a large industrial freezer in a warehouse that was rented by Richard. Then 2 years later, Richard takes him out of the freezer, thaws him out a little bit, and dumps him just over the Jersey border in Rockland County, Orangetown, New York. He was wrapped in plastic garbage bags. And oddly, he had on the exact same clothes that he was wearing the day that he vanished 2 years ago. But the medical examiner thought the body looked fresh. But then during the autopsy, ice crystals were found inside the tissue, and it gave away what had actually happened.
Right.
And if you think about it, if Richard had only waited until the corpse had thoroughly thawed,
Yep.
he might have gotten away with his attempt to foil the reading of the postmortem,
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah.
When Masgay was identified through his fingerprints, Richard became a chief suspect, and the cops started calling him the Iceman. So it wasn't the other mob guys. They called him the Pollock. The cops called him the Iceman.
Wow.
The only thing the police have is that Lewis was, according to his family, he was meeting someone named Richie, but there's nothing else. April 29th, 1982, 51-year-old pharmacist Paul Hoffman was planning on buying drugs off of Richard. Paul Hoffman had been pestering Richard endlessly to get a shipment of Tagament, a prescription ulcer medication, for a cut rate price. This is a pharmacist,
Jeez.
and he's going to a mob guy to get cut rate Tagament.
I'm going to say that our pharmacist at Sam's isn't involved in anything like this.
No, we love John. He's the best.
He's a great guy.
But Richard had nothing for him. He had no Tagament, but he led him to believe that a shipment had come in. And Hoffman was to bring $25,000. And he put the cash together and he went to see Richard. He's very eager to see him inside his rented garage in North Bergen, New Jersey. That was another big mistake. That was the last his family ever saw of him. Richard shot and beat Paul Hoffman to death with a tire iron.
Yeah.
Then he cemented the pharmacist into another steel drum. He left the drum outside a motel next to a hot dog stand in Little Ferry, New Jersey. And occasionally he'd go have a hot dog and see if the barrel was still there.
Oh, man.
Eventually, it was just gone. Apparently somebody had moved it, and to this day, Hoffman's body has never been found.
So he put the body in the 55-barrel drum and poured cement in it?
He poured cement in the bottom to cement him in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Close the lid and put it by a hot dog stand. And he'd go get a hot dog every now and then just see if it was still there.
And no one ever discovered a body in that thing?
They just moved the barrel, apparently.
Wow.
Now, remember I said Richard had lots of businesses going on, and one of them was stealing cars and getting cars for people.
Right.
He had two guys working with him, Gary Smith and Danny Deppner.
Okay.
Gary was a weak and sloppy man, and the police were onto him. There was a warrant out for Gary's arrest on charges of stealing and cashing checks. It was just before Christmas 1982, and to keep Gary from getting picked up, Richard is moving him around from one New Jersey motel to another. And he wasn't protecting him because he liked him. He was just afraid that Gary would get picked up and sing like a canary.
Right.
He'd already gone against everything Richard had said to him about laying low and had hitchhiked home to see his daughter. And Richard knew there's only one way to keep Gary Smith quiet. Richard enlists Danny Deppner, his other car-stealing partner, to help him. But there's a warrant out for Danny as well, and he, too, could not keep his mouth shut. Richard let Danny know through his estranged wife that it was time for Gary to, quote, go to Florida, end quote, which meant it was time for him to die.
Yeah.
Richard had tired of hiding him and footing the bill, not to mention he has to bring him food every day in whatever hotel he's in.
Yeah.
And he was concerned that one or the other of these two men would willingly make a deal with the police to save their own skin, and he wasn't going to let that happen.
Right.
If Richard was anything, he was careful. On the evening of December 15th in the New York motel off Route 3 near the Lincoln Tunnel, Richard Kuklinski brought hamburgers to room 31. Gary Smith liked hamburgers, so that made things easier. Richard handed over the bag of food, giving one wrapped burger to him and one to Deppner, his other partner who showed up.
Right.
He knows that this burger is okay. They both watched as Smith wolfed down the other burger. But nothing happened. And Richard's puzzled, like he had mixed cyanide in ketchup and it was supposed to work pretty daggone fast.
Right.
But Smith wasn't showing any sign of it. He took another bite and then he started to choke. And Richard was so pleased. Finally, the stuff was working. Smith wasn't losing control, but he still wasn't dying quick enough. Richard signaled to the other guy, Deppner, that it was time for the next step. And Deppner took a lamp cord, put it around Smith's throat. He tightened it several times until his colleague in crime was no longer breathing.
Wow.
When Barbara Deppner failed to return with a car to remove the body, Richard had Smith placed beneath the mattress and box springs in room number 31. Let somebody else find him.
No one will ever notice this.
And somebody did.
Wow.
Days later, just after Christmas, the fourth couple to rent the room complained to management of an ungodly odor.
What?
And when the mattress was lifted, the bloated, blackened body that had been baking all that time in the heated room was found. It was Gary Smith.
The fourth couple.
The fourth couple. Now, he's putting these guys in sort of seedy hotels.
Of course, but still.
So maybe they were just using the room for a couple of hours and not spending the entire night. But can you imagine being like, I knew it smelled bad in there.
Wow.
It's funny because in one of the documentaries, Richard talks about the fact that you can use the deodorizer, but as the body starts to disintegrate or decompose, the deodorizer on top of the smell of the body makes it worse. And he would spend like $25 and buy cologne and just throw it all over the walls. And then that would like keep the smell. That would tamp down the smell.
Wow.
Now, while Danny Deppner did the killing, Danny realizes, oh no, I know too much too.
Yeah.
And Richard didn't like that about anybody. When people learned too much about Richard or his business, they're gone.
Right.
And Danny knew it's his turn, and there was nothing he could do about it. Since there's a warrant out for him for burglary and car theft, just like Danny Smith, he was being kept in a variety of motels, compliments of Richard. Then one day in January of 1983, just weeks after Gary Smith's body is found, there are no more trips to motels for Richard because the problem was solved. He killed him. It wasn't until May of 1983, 5 months later, that a giant turkey buzzard showed a man who was on a bicycle that something was up. And he rode his bike closer to see what this great big bird was doing, and he saw a large shape wrapped in green garbage bags. He got even closer, and he sees a face sticking out from a tear in the bag. And he calls the police.
Man.
And when the police get there, one of the things they notice is that the body was dumped just about 3 miles from a ranch where the Kuklinski family went riding horses. He takes his family riding. They're just go get on, let's go ride some horses.
Sure.
They ID'd him from photos that were on his body, and the cause of death was undetermined, although there were pink spots on the skin, and that was photographed. So more than likely it was cyanide.
Right.
Richard became a prime suspect, but they didn't have any evidence to prove what they really thought they knew was the truth.
Right.
He's killed both of these guys. Then there's Robert Pronge, Mr. Softy. He knows a lot about Richard, too. He's taught Richard a lot, like how to use, the cyanide. And on December 15th, 1984, Robert, Mr. Softy, was found shot to death in his Mr. Softy truck in North Bergen, just across the street from Richard Kuklinski's garage. He argued with Richard, and he threatened Richard's family, and we know how that turns out.
Right.
Georgie boy did that.
Yep.
And many think Richard was his killer. The problem is he'd also killed his source of cyanide. He could no longer get cyanide because he's killed this guy.
Sure.
That's called foreshadowing.
Here we go. There you go.
Yep. Now remember, Roy DeMeo, the man reportedly responsible for getting Richard into the mob to begin with. Well, allegedly, Richard never forgot or forgave DeMeo and his goons from the very beginning, because apparently, and I learned this later on as I was going through all this research, apparently at one point, the DeMeo crew they sort of beat up Richard. They kind of ganged up on him a little bit.
Okay.
And Richard never forgot this. And he said that he always harbored an underlying hatred for Roy DeMeo. Then as the cops and FBI were drawing closer and closer to taking DeMeo down, Richard simply saw him as a liability and allegedly murdered him in cold blood on January 10th, 1983, shooting him multiple times in the head. His body was found 10 days later, partially frozen in the trunk of his own Cadillac Coupe de Ville with a chandelier on top of him.
What was the chandelier for?
I don't know. It was in the trunk. The chandelier was already in the trunk, so it killed him, put him in the trunk, and then put the chandelier on top of him.
Okay.
You got to move things around in the trunk,
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
What is the thing? Check your privilege. Not everybody has the trunk space for a body, right?
Yeah.
Did he kill him? Most mob experts believe that it's a crock of you-know-what. Mm-hmm. And some have even said that they doubted that Richard had any sort of relationship with Roy DeMeo or his gang to begin with.
Really?
I don't think that's true. I mean, Richard's not mentioned in the many books that cover the DeMeo crew. And he was only photographed one time in the Gemini Lounge. Mm-hmm. And he's not been brought up in later conversations with the crew. And it's widely believed that the DeMeo crew were the ones who took Roy DeMeo out. But Richard Kuklinski says he's the one who killed Roy DeMeo.
Okay.
Then in 1985, a newly formed organized crime and racketeering task force was formed and was handed an interesting case file. A group of detectives were brought together and outside of New Jersey to focus on Cosa Nostra. And the first case they took a look at was Georgie Boy, George Malaban, the guy who was stuffed into the barrel with his leg broken and turned backwards, just in case you don't remember.
Yep.
And there were a series of car thefts and burglaries in North New Jersey, and officers were investigating and noticed that the persons in charge of those crimes ended up dead. People like George Miliband and Louis Masgay and Philip Hoffman, and a group of experienced detectives from Jersey, New York, and even Pennsylvania come together to work in this task force. And they start reopening these murder cases to see if there's any connection. Mm-hmm. But there's a guy in the New Jersey State Police. He's a detective named Pat Kane. He started looking into these cases 6 years before this task force is even put together.
Gotcha.
Now, I want you to meet ATF Special Agent Dominic Polifrone, an undercover agent who went by Dominic Provenzano.
Another one of those names.
Dominic Provenzano, who specialized in mafia cases. And Detective Pat Kane recruited Phil Solimene, a friend of Richard, and introduced Dominic, or Dom, to Richard Kuklinski.
Okay.
So Detective Pat Kane recruits Phil, who's a friend of Richard Kuklinski's, and introduces Dominic to Richard. So now this undercover ATF guy has met Richard.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay.
I got it.
They give Dom a fake rap sheet and a fake mug shot, and he started cozying up to Richard, and they called it Operation Iceman. When he finally gained Richard's trust, Dom told him he wanted to help him take out a rich kid who was looking for cocaine. He wants to hire Richard for the hit, or to help him with the hit. And this entire time, he's with Richard. Dom is wearing a wire, and he's recording all of these conversations with the Iceman for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Now, I want you to remember, it's 1984. Mm-hmm. It's not like the wires that we wear now that the FBI can do now.
Yeah.
This is like a whole wire, like taped to his body.
Yeah.
He was risking his life to do this.
Richard would have shot him on sight.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So he starts hanging out at a place called The Store. It's a joint that Richard liked to frequent. He posed as this underworld killer, a wise guy, just like Richard. Quote, I pulled up, I had a black Mark IV Lincoln, beautiful car, my leather jacket and money and rings and all that. I had to start hanging out at the store, let them feel comfortable, which after a while they did. They felt very comfortable with me, and then things started rolling. But it wasn't easy to get a face-to-face sit down with the elusive Big Rich. Kuklinski was avoiding the place because he knew the cops were looking for him, end quote.
Right.
So Dom has this Lincoln, this black Lincoln, his leather jacket. He's got rings on. You know, he comes in. He's like the man. He's the dude. You know, he's really like, he's working his role.
It's
okay.
The ultimate cosplay.
It really is. But again, he's risking his life.
Sure.
Because I keep thinking does he have something in his pocket? I mean, I keep thinking there's going to be like a box somewhere on his body.
Yeah.
After 18 months of cozying up to Richard, Dom arranged to meet him and discuss business.
All right.
And Richard was interested in meeting Dom because he was supposed to be as much of a badass killer as he was. So he's like, I'm meeting a contemporary here. And he was willing to buy and sell just like Richard. Okay.
Okay.
These two meet up at a local donut shop all the time in the Vince Lombardi Service Center. And all I could think of when I read that was, don't the cops hang out at the donut shops? Why would these guys go to a donut shop?
Yeah. Wow.
But somehow Dom gains Richard's friendship. And this is when Richard starts to confess, or maybe I should say brag, about all the people he'd killed. Now, remember, he thinks Dom is a badass killer like him.
Yeah.
And all of these confessions, all this bragging, it's all being recorded.
Man.
He told Dom who he murdered, how he murdered them, and what he did with bodies, not to mention how much he enjoyed carrying out the hits. On December 17th, 1986, based on the testimony of this undercover agent, Dominic, who'd infiltrated this Gambino family over this period of 6 years and had started talking to Richard, the Attorney General's office, the New Jersey State Police, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms all worked together. Again, the plan was that Dom needed Richard's help in offing a rich kid who wanted cocaine. So this kid was going to show up with a bunch of money. They didn't have any cocaine. They just wanted the money. They were going to kill the kid.
Right.
And Richard tells him in great detail on tape how they could do it. And cyanide was the best way. But he doesn't have any. So Dom lies and tells Richard, oh, I can get the cyanide. I can get cyanide. And what the Bureau actually gives him is called quinine. And Richard has with him on the day that they're going to meet with this fictional rich kid,
right,
egg salad sandwiches in the car. That's what they're going to put the cyanide on.
Gotcha.
And all I could think of was egg salad sandwiches make me want to barf. And if I showed up and I was supposed to be like the rich kid, I'd be like, yeah, I want my cocaine. I don't want your egg salad, right?
Well, see, I'm just the opposite, though.
I know you are. Rob would have eaten the whole egg salad sandwich.
In one bite.
So he shows up and he and Dom, he gets the cyanide, he puts it on the sandwiches. But at the same time, I also read that Richard kind of smelled a rat. And so he put some on a hamburger or something and fed it to a dog because he wanted to see if it was real. And the dog didn't die. So did he know or did he not know? Because they're two different stories. He says he knew.
Okay.
Operation Iceman says he didn't have a clue. He didn't have a clue what was happening.
Right.
But on the morning of December 17th, 1986, his wife Barbara wasn't feeling well. But Richard still went to meet with Dom. He's got the sandwiches. He told him, here are the sandwiches, put the cyanide on. I'll be back. And he rushed home to be with Barbara to take her to the doctor. And when he goes home, the police surround Richard's house. They block off his entire street. He gets in the car. He starts to pull out. All the cops, they sort of just converge on him. They stop him. He tried to get away. He jumped the curb and was going through somebody's yard. They still get him. When they arrested Richard, Barbara's in the seat next to him, not knowing what's going on.
Jeez, that's amazing. 25 years and she had no idea.
Yeah.
Wow.
They get him out of the car. He's fighting them. But they get him out of the car and they get him to the ground and they handcuff him.
Yeah, wow. I wonder how many guys it took to get him down. This is a big guy.
Well, I think it took 6.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why in just a second.
Okay.
But there was a loaded gun under the seat of the car. And since Barbara's in the car, they charge her with possession of a deadly weapon. It was a tactic they were going to use against Richard because they knew that nothing was more important to him than his family. Mm-hmm. He was charged with 5 murders: Daniel E. Deppner, Gary T. Smith, who they found underneath the bed, George Malibrand, Louis Masgay, and Paul Hoffman. And the bail is set by Bergen County Judge Peter, he's an Italian guy, Cilione, for $2 million.
Okay.
Now, Richard's defense attorney, Frank P. Luciana, another Italian guy,
right.
He goes to the judge and says, look, my client has been crime-free. He's got a crime-free record for the past 20 years, which is such a joke. But the prosecution, Deputy Attorney General Robert Carroll, tells the court that Richard had been to Switzerland lots of times. And when they looked into it, he had another flight to Switzerland booked. Oh. He was a flight risk. And he told Dom, their undercover agent, that he had, quote, one more problem to take care of, then he would retire because he had money out of the country, end quote.
Ah, okay.
When Richard's finally arrested, his children aren't children anymore. Merrick is 22, Christian is 21, and Dwayne is 18. Barbara was charged with this possession of the firearm and resisting arrest because she's like, he hasn't done anything. What are you doing with my husband? I mean, I'd be charged with resisting arrest if you got pulled over. I'd take somebody out, you know? Don't touch my husband. But as they're dragging him in after they arrest him, there are all these cameras there. And he wears these sort of rose-colored glasses, which I think is kind of ironic. Yeah. But he wears these sort of rose-colored glasses that just make him look like, I don't know what, kind of like the devil in disguise or something.
Right.
But as he's being led into the police station, he's telling all the cameras, do you see this? You look at this? It took 6 of them. It took 6 of them. Took 6 of them to take me down. I haven't done anything. Look at all of this. You know, he's just running his mouth the whole time.
Sure.
But Barbara's telling the police that her husband deals in foreign currency and, quote, has never done anything wrong, end quote.
Think again.
When the agents from Operation Iceman start going through all these tapes, he's telling Dom all about his kills, how easy it is to kill with cyanide, sprinkling it on food or spraying it in the victim's face. You know, he goes into great detail. Right. And he vividly tells Dom how he killed a man with cyanide on a crowded street. Quote, I was walking down the street. It was crowded. I went by this one guy, made believe I was sneezing. I had a handkerchief over my nose. I bumped into the guy. Psst. I kept walking. They thought the guy had a heart attack. Nice and quiet, end quote.
Man.
Richard boasted about a lot of things he'd never done over the years, saying, quote, I mean, I'm no virgin, end quote. His first trial was for the murders of Gary Smith and Daniel Deppner, his past business associates who were in the car stealing business with him. And as the trial gets underway in front of Judge Frederick, oh gosh, this guy's German, Kuchenmeister. I think I got that one right because it took 3 years of German.
Cookie Monster.
Kuchenmeister. Actually, I think it does mean like cake master. So it's like a baker. But big old Richard stands up and introduces himself to the jury saying, quote, hi, I'm Richard Kuklinski, end quote. And the judge goes, sit down.
Man.
Remember, he's charming.
Yeah.
He's like, hi, he's just going to introduce himself.
Right.
March 1988, Richard is convicted of murdering the 2 underlings in his burglary ring, Daniel E. Deppner and Gary T. Smith, both of Vernon, Pennsylvania. He's sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole until the age of 111.
Wow.
In May of 1988, Richard pleads guilty to fatally shooting George Malibrand and Louis Masgay, both of Pennsylvania. In return for his plea, the state drops the charge against Barbara.
Yeah.
And they dropped the charge against Richard for an April 1982 slaying of Paul Hoffman.
Okay.
He had to confess
Right.
to killing the pharmacist. In 1992, Richard says during an HBO program that he killed up to 100 people. Now, HBO went in and interviewed him. They did it the first time, and then they came back and they did part 2. And then they came back and they did part 3. They just kept talking to him, and he just kept telling them stories.
Wow.
In 1993, Richard says in a book that he murdered Roy DeMeo, the Gambino crime family member. He also takes credit for murdering Robert Prongay of North Bergen, whose body was found in 1984. In 2001, Richard appears in the second HBO special and claims he was paid by the mob to kill New York City police detective Peter Calabro. Remember, we talked about him, too.
Yeah.
February 2003, Richard is charged with and pleads guilty to Detective Calabro's murder and implicates former Gambino underboss Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano.
Yeah.
And a week later, Sammy the Bull is charged with the murder. And another 30 years is tacked on to Richard's sentence. Now, he's in prison. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But he implicates Sammy in this, right?
He's got nothing to lose.
December 2003, Sammy the Bull appears in court and pleads not guilty to murder. Then, before they can try Sammy, on March 6, 2006, Richard Kuklinski, who was to be the star witness against Sammy the Bull Gravano, dies. Authorities drop the murder charges against Sammy. There are many who believe that it was a hit on Richard. In 1993, Barbara actually divorced Richard. Barbara would visit him once a year, even after the divorce. His children made sure that they would never repeat the behavior of their father. While Richard's incarcerated, he was interviewed so many times by criminologists, psychiatrists, writers, prosecutors, television producers. And while being interviewed, Richard provided great insight into the type of man and killer he was. He never killed women or children. That was the one thing he said. I never killed women and I never killed children.
He did have scruples.
He did beat his wife. Yeah.
Jeez.
And he did have interesting techniques for his hits because, according to him, he liked leaving a victim tied up in a cave so rats could eat him alive.
Ugh.
These types of murders were filmed so the client would have proof that the victim suffered terribly before dying.
Man.
But I also read that the caves where he supposedly said he left these bodies, they're toured by people all the time. And so the police are like, there's no way he did this.
Right.
Not in those caves anyway.
Yeah.
Before he died, Richard gave an interview with Philip Carlo where he said he was involved in the kidnapping and murder of Jimmy Hoffa.
Ah.
But previously, he'd claimed he didn't know anything about what happened to Jimmy Hoffa, apart from the rumors that he'd been murdered and placed in a barrel that was then put into a Japanese car that was compacted and shipped overseas. But there's no evidence to support that story.
Right.
Richard died at 1:15 a.m. on March 5th, 2006. He was 70 years old, and he couldn't just die. No, it had to be considered suspicious.
Yeah.
But before he died, Richard told his family that he thought he was being poisoned in prison by the Gambino crime ring. After he died, a renowned forensic pathologist was asked to examine the autopsy results to determine if Richard had indeed been poisoned, and he said no, that Richard died of complications related to Kawasaki disease. He had heart complications related to it. He had coronary artery aneurysms and inflammation.
Oh, it was called Kawasaki?
Kawasaki disease.
Oh, well, that's different than Harley-Davidson disease.
So the more he spoke to all these experts and criminologists and psychologists, and especially the people at HBO, there's been books written about him. The more he talked to these people, the first time he's interviewed, he killed, a lot of people. Right. The second time he's interviewed, I killed more than 100. By the time he gives his last interview, he says he's killed over 200 people. So did he really kill all of those people, or did he just want his life to be bigger than it really was?
Yeah.
As for retired alcohol, tobacco, and firearms special agent Dominic Polifrone, the man who went undercover as the wise guy and wore this wire, put his life on the line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He still gives interviews. It's pretty incredible, all the stuff that he talks about. There are those who call Richard the Iceman a homicide superstar and the Mick Jagger of murder. But other mafia experts call Richard the Forrest Gump of mob hits.
Oh, man. How would you like to be known for that? Jeez.
Not that Richard wasn't bad. He was. He had a natural gift for manipulating people, and he loved to tell tales about his murders, some of which couldn't be his own kills. Each time he was interviewed, he'd killed more and more people.
Right.
So how many people did he really kill? He obviously murdered people, obviously, and had no feeling about it whatsoever.
Right.
But I do think he was a little bit of a fabricator when it came to his career.
Yeah.
An interesting fact before we go, Richard's younger brother, Joseph Michael, I think he went by Mike.
Okay.
In 1970, he was convicted of sexually assaulting a 12-year-old girl before killing her dog and throwing them off the top of a 5-story building.
What?
Richard hated his brother for this. Killed a child.
Yeah.
They were housed in the same prison in Trenton, New Jersey. But Richard hated his brother so much for this. Remember, no women, no children.
Right.
Of course, he would hit Barbara. But when these two brothers would pass each other in the passageways of prison, he would only acknowledge him. Didn't talk to him. It's like, hi, how you doing?
Right.
Hey, how you doing? That was it. Yeah. They didn't hang out together, nothing like that. And when he's asked later what he thought of his brother, Richard simply replied, quote, "We come from the same father." End quote.
Wow.
But that is the story of Richard the Iceman Kuklinski. Did he kill all those people? I think he killed enough. But that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kaiwolf project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she'd left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, no regrets, no mercy.
Well, here's my take on everything.
Rob's take.
Rob's take. Take two. They say they only have one photograph of him at the
Gemini.
At the Gemini. But he was a very, very careful and methodical person.
He was.
So if he was paranoid, which he obviously was, maybe he took great care to not be seen or to have any photographs taken. I mean, I don't know.
True. And the DeMeo crew, think about this. He's saying that he did these, Richard's saying, I did these hits for DeMeo.
Right.
And the DeMeo crew saying, we didn't do any hits with him. Well, why would they ever admit
yeah, exactly.
to doing a hit at all?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. Do I think he killed 200 people? I don't know.
He was very grandiose. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he killed a bunch, but yeah. I don't know that it was close to 100. And then by the time, he was older, he was like, 200. I've killed 200 people.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And again, like I said before, he killed enough.
Right. Yeah. One person's enough.
He killed enough.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you've got an operation, if you've got a multitask force operation, Iceman with your name attached to it, you've killed enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, hey, listen, before we start the stupid criminals.
Yes.
The bless your hearts. I want to give a shout out to all of our peeps here in Kentucky and the surrounding areas. We were just inundated with the worst storm, a generational storm.
Yes.
And there was a lot of people that, lost everything, even lost some lives. And so our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone here in Kentucky and Tennessee,
Arkansas,
the whole 9 yards.
It's been rough.
Yeah.
Even we've had 3 sleepless nights in a row.
Yeah. So if I look a little tired, it's because
I look a little tired.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, our thoughts and prayers go out to them.
Absolutely.
And we're glad that this storm is finally over.
Send it on. I'm telling you what. It was a lot.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's raise your spirits a little bit with a little stupidity and bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right. Number 1, there's good TikTok content, and then there's this.
Okay.
All right. You ready?
Yes.
A content creator in Florida was arrested last week after she allegedly caught shoplifting in her own video.
Oh my gosh.
Cape Coral.
Seriously?
Yeah, she did. Cape Coral.
Cape Coral, Florida?
Yeah, Cape Coral, Florida.
Uh-huh. It's a beautiful place.
Or Carl. I don't know. Cape Coral police visited a Target location in response to an alleged theft that had occurred.
Oh, okay.
In a police statement, an unknown female entered the store and selected items listed for sale. Once at the self-checkout register, the female suspect did not scan the items' barcodes.
Oh.
Yeah. Instead, she scanned false barcodes with cheaper prices.
Oh.
Yeah, she had a little thing going on there. Police confirmed 16 items valued at $500 were taken before releasing security images of the suspect seen in a tan shirt and pants. A tipster then reported the suspect appeared to be Marlena Velez.
Oh, it's like, I know her.
Yeah.
That's Marlena.
A content creator with more than 350,000 followers on TikTok.
What? She has that, and she's stealing?
Yeah.
She's shoplifting?
Yep. A video shared on Velez's account showed the 22-year-old preparing for alleged theft in the same outfit and glasses.
Oops.
Picking out items in the store, then loading them into her vehicle, police said.
Oops.
She essentially incriminated herself, Officer Riley Carter tells the Express Tribune.
Not smart.
Now, the video has since been removed. Velez was arrested Thursday and charged with 1 count of petty theft. She was later released on bond. She was also arrested last year for shoplifting at a Walmart in Cape Coral after surveillance footage showed her underringing items at a self-checkout per the Tribune.
So she's done that more than once.
Yeah.
I always think when I'm checking out at the grocery store, how do they know I've bought the organic apples?
Yeah.
Or the cheaper pesticide apples.
Yeah.
I always say that I bought the organic apples. I just want to, I'm honest about it. But how do they know that?
I don't know. But she pleaded no contest, completed an anti-theft course, and served 6 months of probation.
She just got 6 months of probation for that?
That's it.
Okay.
All right, number 2. Keep the change, you filthy animal.
Okay.
An alleged armed robber was foiled in the early hours of Christmas Day in what police say was like a scene from Home Alone.
Okay.
Police say Luis Ordonez, I'm sure I'm butchering that name, concealed himself behind a business in Gainesville, Georgia, which had been experiencing unusually low temperatures.
Inside the building?
No, he was behind the building.
Oh, okay. But the building had been...
No, this will make sense in a second.
Okay.
Okay. Well, then he had demanded cash from an employee who left the building around 1 a.m., Sunday, Fox 5 reports. Police say a physical altercation followed when a second employee left the business. Ordonez was startled and fired a shot that didn't hit anybody. But then he tried to run off and slipped on a patch of ice. Now, remember, this is Christmas, okay?
Okay.
So it does get cold in Georgia. On a patch of ice and hit his head, police say. Police say witnesses took 2 guns from Ordonez while he was on the ground. He was then taken to the county jail and charged with armed robbery and aggravated assault. Gainesville Police Lieutenant Kevin Holbrook tells Gainesville Times that it's not clear whether facial injuries seen in the suspect's mugshots happened from the fall or an altercation at the scene.
Oh, okay.
And I've seen the mugshot. He's pretty messed up.
Is he?
Oh, my gosh. We know that this is what the police said. We know that it is how officers found him when they arrived, Holbrook says.
So they beat him for his gun.
I'm going to guess that he didn't go down very easily.
Yeah.
By the look of his face.
Even though he was down already.
Oh, my gosh. All right, number 3, and finally. They'll never know.
Okay. They'll never know
Exactly.
that she scanned the real apples and took the organic ones.
Yeah, exactly. A Florida man allegedly tried to make a purchase of a Porsche 911 Turbo from a dealership in Destin on Monday for nearly $140,000.
Okay.
Now, purchased, I'm kind of doing my air quotes here, all right? However, it may have been too loose of a word to describe the transaction, as the $139,203.05 cashier's check that the 42-year-old man presented bounced, and the car was reported stolen.
Okay. Couldn't have been a real cashier's check then.
Yeah. Kelly, the guy, was arrested on Wednesday, and he told authorities that the check hadn't actually come from the bank, but was simply printed off of his home computer.
I thought you were going to say, like, tried to buy it with a library card or something.
Before he was nabbed, Kelly made one other stop on Tuesday. His arrest reported noted to a Miramar Beach jewelry store where he ponied up another phony check in the amount of $61,521 to pay for 3 Rolex watches.
He had one good day.
This time, however, the jeweler held on to the watches to make sure the check cleared first. It didn't. Kelly now faces charges of grand theft of a motor vehicle and uttering a false banknote. I'm going to say
uttering?
Yeah.
How do you utter a false banknote?
I don't know. That's what they said. He was uttering a false banknote.
Is that the right word?
Yeah. That's what they said. He was uttering a false banknote.
Okay.
I guess that's a charge now.
Uttering.
Yeah. Don't utter your false banknotes or you'll get in trouble.
Sorry, I couldn't help.
Well, there's your bless your hearts for this week.
Is my black library card. You have a black American Express that you can buy a Porsche with. This is my black library card. That's what I thought you were going to say, that he had like something like that.
No, I just love the fact that he printed it off of his computer at home.
He's resourceful, if anything.
Yeah. He was sitting there one day and he went, "Hey, I got a printer.
I'd like to have a Porsche."
Yeah.
He had the 5 cents, but not the rest of it.
I just love the fact he thought he would get away with it. Are you serious, dude?
Well, he did. He drove away in a car. So if you think about it, he did.
Whatever.
Well, if you have a bless your heart, or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchedtohomicide.com. When you get there,
uttering.
You can pull down an uttering. No, you can pull down the menu. We'll pull down.
Yeah.
We're off the rails.
Yeah.
No sleep.
Oh my gosh.
You haven't lived until you're in your basement in a motorcycle helmet while the tornado sirens are going off at 3 a.m. Sorry.
Good times.
It was good times. Jeez. Scotty had one too.
Oh my gosh.
When you get to Hitched Homicide, you can find a pull down menu, and while you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime, or give us a bless your heart.
Yes, please.
That's my amazing husband out there.
And that's my beautiful ride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.